Our first question this week comes from Yale County Hog 21, who says, obviously this basketball team has limitations due to their lack of size and depth, which is no fault of Coach Muss. What grade would you give him and the team so far? I'll give Musselman an A+, as high a grade as I can give him. I think he's taken this team as far as you could take this team, given the limitations you talked about, lack of size, lack of depth. Now we get into injury situations where he has even certain starters not available. And where they are right now at 16-5, I don't think anybody would have thought that start of the season. So he gets an A+. I'm going to give the team, the players, a B+. I like the fact that they play hard, they never give up. They've won several games this year where you thought they were beat. All of that's good, but they do have a tendency not to listen to him at times. A good example of that, the South Carolina game, they played so well against TCU at the good shot selection that Musselman mentioned, where they took 9 3-pointers and hit 6 of them. Then they come back, and what do they do against South Carolina? They shoot over 23s. And he said after the game, if we had shot fewer threes and attacked the basket more, we'd have won the game. And then you can go to the last minute and 8 seconds of that Alabama game. They're up by 7. They got the game won, and then you got 2 players in the last minute and 8 seconds that fouled guys on 3-point shots. And they got bailed out because Alabama got bailed out because they missed both of those shots, and yet ended up with 5 points because of the fouling. And you have Mason Jones, who with under a minute left is supposedly milking the shot clock, getting it all the way down as far as possible before he takes a shot. And with 12, 13 seconds still left on the clock, he mysteriously jacks up an NBA 3 instead of trying to go in and, get a foul maybe. So they did a lot of things at the end of that game that could have cost them the game, but it didn't. But again, can't give these guys an A because they don't always do what the head coach asks them to do. Okay, Nooga Hog wants to know, is Nolan still around the basketball program? Is he still coming to games now that Mike Anderson is gone? Does he have any relationship with Coach Eric Musselman? He hasn't been to a lot of games this year. The word is his wife is sick. His wife, Rose, is pretty much bedridden, and I don't think he feels like he can leave the Richardson Ranch to go to games. So you don't see him around as much. I think if he returns and starts watching games in the future, they'll have a good relationship. I just don't think they've been around each other a lot. I do know that he said some positive things about Musselman when he was hired. Eric Musselman has done a lot to embrace the tradition that Nolan brought to the program. Talked about the national championship team and the success Nolan has had a lot of his players back to talk to his current team. So the chemistry is all there. Plus, Nolan is not one of those guys that doesn't want other people to equal his success. I think he'd be very happy if Musselman, took this team to the Final Four, won a national championship, whatever. I don't think Nolan would be jealous of that. I think he would like it. And again, hopefully in the future he'll be back in his seat at Bud Walton Arena and he'll be back in there as a fan again. Cowhog 32 asks, with the recent passing of Kobe Bryant, can you tell us what current Razorback most possesses that mentality? I'd have to go with Jimmy Witt Jr. The kid works his tail off on both ends of the floor. He's averaging 36.5 minutes a game, rarely comes out. And if you look, the games this team has lost, they've been games where he didn't play well, had some sort of a problem. Again, a guy with total intensity, total focus. I'd go with Jimmy Witt Jr. Hot Atlanta Hog is curious, what was the deal with the officiating and number of fouls on both sides in the South Carolina game? It was painful to watch. Was the technical foul deserved? South Carolina is tops in fouls in the SEC and one of the foulingest teams in the country in Division I basketball. I think Frank Martin knew that and realized there could be a real problem for his team in the second half. And so he did a very smart thing, in my opinion. He went off on the referees after the halftime clock stopped while the game was not going on. Before he went to the dressing room, he stood out there for about 30 seconds, just went off on those guys. I think he intimidated them. I think they went back to their locker room and talked a lot about balancing the number of fouls in the second half. And we saw a number of so-called phantom calls if you were at the arena, you could look up after the foul was called, and the fans were just going nuts. They were booing because you could see that there was no foul on this play or that play. But I think it was just referees trying to balance out the total number of fouls. It still ended up in Arkansas's favor, but it could have been way out of balance. Instead, it wasn't that much out of balance. But still, that's not what cost Arkansas the game. Again, they missed too many free throws and took too many three-point shots. That's straight from Eric Musselman. Said 76 asked, can you explain to everyone why the University of Arkansas keeping a presence in Central Arkansas is important? On message boards and social media, it seems that most Arkansas fans, go crazy over this stuff. Now, why is that? Because a lot of people feel like if I live in Northwest Arkansas and I have tickets, why should I have to go all the way down to Little Rock to watch a football or a basketball or a baseball game, even though we're only talking one game every other year in football, one game a year in baseball and basketball. They'll also tell you that no other school does that at one time it was very common. Alabama used to play a game in Birmingham every year with Auburn. Auburn used to play some games in Atlanta. All of these schools gave that up when they began to expand their stadiums, and it was so expensive to do that, and they could make so much more money to help pay that off and help support their athletic department that they weren't running around playing in other places. Those situations are totally different from what we have here in Arkansas. You know, it's a small state. You cannot sit down as a Razorback fan who lives in Northwest Arkansas and doesn't want those Central Arkansas games played. You cannot in any way explain to me how it would help Arkansas if the Razorbacks got almost all of their support from Northwest Arkansas. I hear this talk all the time. It's a growing area and we got the money up here and they got populations growing. Before you know it, there'll be more people up here than in Central Arkansas. Doesn't matter. All that's nonsense. You have to have the whole state. This all went back to right after the end of World War II. John Barnhill had this idea. I mean, Arkansas had played, at that time was playing some games in Memphis, some in Little Rock, not in big stadiums, but Fayetteville at that time was a town of 6,000 to 7,000. Northwest Arkansas probably had 30,000 people in the whole area. You just could not support a football team and get big crowds like you could when you went to a bigger city. So the idea was, no, you're not going to do that all the time, but you play some games there, and it helps spread your message, get you fans all over the state. And so here's what happened. Clyde Scott comes along. He's at the Naval Academy, plays 2 years there, right at the end of World War II. Then Miss Arkansas is up there, and she's supposed to have an escort, an upperclassman, at the Naval Academy while she goes around in the days before the Miss America pageant. Something happens to this guy, he gets assigned another duty, and Clyde Scott ends up being her escort. They get to know each other, they fall in love, they get married. She's a U of A student, and he says, I'm going to live where my wife goes to school. He gives up that attendance at the Naval Academy, enrolls at Arkansas, even though several other schools wanted him when they realized he was going to leave there. And that was a huge story all over the state. It became big news. And that was about the time War Memorial Stadium opened. So you combine all of those things, and Arkansas truly does, at that point, become a factor all over the state. And it's been that way ever since. But the way War Memorial was treated and that whole game and the way this stuff is with basketball and baseball, with a lot of these fans saying, I can't even get to the game on my computer, I don't want those games played, that is very short-sighted. They need to continue to play that basketball and that baseball game in North Little Rock, and they need to continue to play the football game every other year at War Memorial Stadium. Just my opinion. Swine American says the baseball team struggled last fall when they played Oklahoma and Oklahoma State in exhibition games. Should we read anything into that in terms of how we will perform this spring and summer, or did Dave Van Horn simply evaluate talent and individual performance without any emphasis on winning those games? No, believe me, he wanted to win those games. Actually, what happened in those two games is Arkansas got good pitching. They didn't have enough hitting. Casey Martin was out. He had a hand injury, got operated on. Braden Webb, the JUCO All-American, who's just gone crazy in these preseason scrimmages. I mean, the guy's hit grand slams. He's hit multiple home runs, doubles, triples. He wasn't available. He was hurt last fall. And then the true freshman, the 17-year-old kid, the second baseman, he was still in high school last fall. He enrolled in January. I mean, he's a switch hitter. He can spray it all over the field. He's also got some pop in his bat. So you plug those three guys into the lineup, and here's where we'll find out. Because right off the bat, they're going to play those teams when they go down to Houston the second week of the season, I think. So we'll find out what really happened in those exhibition games and if that problem at the plate has been corrected. Hammer Down asks, what is your prediction for the baseball team this year? Do you believe they will make the College World Series again? What is their greatest obstacle to getting there? Maybe the best team on paper I've ever seen in the preseason for Arkansas. They got 3 all-SEC players, 2 of them first-teamers, and that's where you start. They got a lineup where everybody can hit. There are no weak spots. You can't look at this spot or that spot and say, ooh, maybe that's a problem. So they can hit for power. They can hit for average. They've got players left over. Casey Opitz on Media Day last Friday talked about when you split this squad in half for these preseason scrimmages, and so you dilute the roster and the batting order for each team. They're still getting lots of hits, producing lots of offense. He said, we've got guys that played a lot last year that may not play as much this year. We've got guys that could start on other SEC teams that won't start here. Maybe they'll just pinch hit, maybe insert it into the batting order if somebody's hurt or whatever. That's how much talent they have offensively. The defense is good. Our sports director, Jason Carroll, has shot a lot of these preseason scrimmages, and I've watched some of them, and I've seen some really amazing defensive plays. The only place where I see there might be a problem, and most of us have seen it, Heston Kjerstad out in right field sometimes loses the ball, and a lot of times it's an adventure watching him catch a high fly ball out there, but he's got a great arm, the kind of guy that can cut down a base runner trying to go from first to third on a base hit. So there's just no real issues there defensively. The only issue, the only thing I can see that might keep them from getting back to Omaha is starting pitching on the weekend. The Sunday starter is still not decided upon, but there are several good candidates. But here's the issue. Connor Nolan's probably your Friday night guy. By all accounts, he's looking really good right now. You're talking about a guy that was in the weekend rotation as a true freshman last year. But how can he do what either Blaine Knight or Isaiah Campbell did? Those guys the last 2 years, I think they were 26-1 combined. That's your Friday night guy. You're just not going to get that this year. I don't know what Connor Nolan's final record will be. It could be very good, but it's not going to be that. So I don't think you can count on an automatic win on Friday night, and so that might be a bit of an issue. But there's so much that we don't know about this pitching staff yet. Again, there are several good candidates for that third spot in the rotation. The bullpen appears to be very deep. They've got to come up with a closer, and there may be 3 or 4 candidates. They may end up with more than one closer. So right now I would say things are looking really good. Orlando Hogg wants to know, do you have a favorite Steve Atwater story when he was in Arkansas? And congratulations to the newest member of the Hall of Fame. Well, here's a story that will demonstrate just how smart I am. When Atwater dropped that surefire interception in the Orange Bowl, Arkansas was 9-0 at the time and was ahead in the fourth quarter late in the game. If Atwater makes that interception, if he catches that ball, which was right in his hands, Arkansas goes to the Cotton Bowl unbeaten, and they snap Miami's humongous winning streak, and they sort of get Jimmy Johnson back for that 87 game where he pounded Arkansas in Little Rock. All of that could have happened, but Atwater dropped that pass, and it was right in his hands. And I don't remember who the guy next to me was, but I do remember what I said. I said that's why he will never make it in the NFL. He's a great tackler, he's physical, but he does not have the hands to be a pro safety. And of course, he ended up being All-Pro multiple times. Now he's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I hope whoever that was next to me doesn't remember what I said. It was embarrassing to think about it. Super Hogs 1959 recalls, years ago, I read Lou Holtz's book where he said the 77 Arkansas team was probably the best team ever. I read somewhere he told people that the Hogs would win the 78 Orange Bowl and it wouldn't be close. He later said he changed the entire blocking line, offensive blocking line schemes in 1 month. Is that true? It's true that he told his players they're going to win the game. And he did that even though he had suspended 3 of his best offensive players. He did it because he knew what kind of depth that team had. And that team had depth out the wazoo. because Frank Broyles and his staff had done a great job the previous 2 or 3 years recruiting all those guys. Now, I don't remember anything about the blocking schemes being changed. I do remember the hot rumor that came out of that game, and it started before we ever got back to Arkansas. And the rumor was that supposedly Barry Switzer and his defensive coordinator, Larry Lacewell, got in a big blow-up the week of the game. And Lacewell ended up so mad that there's two versions of that story. Either he gave his defensive game plan to Lou Holtz, or he found Barry Switzer's notes or whatever and gave the offensive game plan to Lou Holtz. Whatever it was, that supposedly was why Arkansas won that game. Look, it was a stupid rumor at the time. It was obviously started by an OU fan who was embarrassed and thought it would. I think the blow-up they had was real, but I don't think any of that stuff happened. I don't think Larry Lacewell would give those notes to Lou Holtz, and I don't think he would take them. I was there in 1969, says the little general capitulated and listened to the idea of changing our starting five against the Gamecocks. Do you think Coach Muss is likely to listen to this particular assistant again when it comes to who starts and who may get to come off the bench to play limited minutes the rest of the season? Okay, you're referring to something that he said before the South Carolina game when he talked about walking his dog and his dog told him what lineup change to make. Well, he made some lineup changes in that game. They didn't win, but he was asked before the Alabama game if he was going to continue to do that, and he said he was, and he did make a lineup change that proved successful before the Alabama game, as Reggie Chaney ended up starting and Adriel Bailey stayed on the bench, and that paid off for Arkansas. And I would assume he's going to continue to do that. That's what he seemed to indicate, but honestly, it doesn't have anything to do with the dog, unless the dog somehow has learned to talk, or Rick Musselman has ESP and can mind meld in with the dog's brain. Okay, whatever this is, no TOM, Rebel 123 says, Gary Krane with the UAPD has sat behind the visitors' bench at Bud Walton Arena for years. With the stir caused by Calipari's recent ejection, has anyone ever interviewed him about the funny or interesting things he's overheard opposing coaches say over the years? Okay, for those of you that don't know, Krane is the UAPD officer that escorts the opposing coach out of the locker room and onto the court, sits behind him during the game, back at halftime, and then back out on the court, and then back after the game, just to make sure nobody does anything stupid to the opposing coach. I know him. He's a real nice guy, but he's also very quiet. There have been a couple of articles written about him, but I'm pretty sure he's way too professional to reveal any juicy tidbits about what an opposing coach might have said, even if he had those tidbits. Just too professional for that. Blood Red Hog observes, the SEC does not look strong this year in basketball. There's no dominant team. What is your prediction for how many teams from the conference will make it to the big dance? I think you're correct. I think the conference is very competitive, but at the top, you got 3 teams ranked, nobody in the top 10. That might affect the number of teams in. The projections I've seen are for 6 teams, and I would say that's accurate. I guess it could go to 7 or drop to 5, depending on what happens between now and the end of the season. But my best guess is 6 SEC teams will get in. Lanny wants to know, how big was the Alabama win? Will it get Arkansas into the NCAA tournament? Barring a collapse, I think it puts this team over the top. They're 4 wins short of 20 now. Plus, they've won 2 SEC road games, and they're 4-3 overall in road games. But here's the big deal. The Indiana win on the road and the Alabama win, those are 2 teams that play very well at home. Alabama had not lost a single SEC game at home. In fact, they had blown out Auburn and Mississippi State. So that was a huge win. The power rankings are out again this week, and Arkansas is 5th in the power rankings in the SEC. So if 6 get in or 7 or whatever, I think Arkansas is in. They got to do a little bit more to get there. Beating Auburn on Tuesday night would really help. All right, this reminder, all the questions I use are posted on hogville.net. Go there. If you're not a member, you sign up for free and post your questions in the Ask Mike forum. That's it for now. I'll be back next Monday where once again you can ask Mike.